I think we can all pretty much agree now that the Star Wars sequel trilogy was a disappointment for most of us, and there are many of us that are not particularly big fans of Disney and what they have been doing with the Star Wars franchise. One popular thing for us fans to talk about is back when George sold Lucasfilm to Disney, it was with the belief that Disney would use George Lucas's story treatments for the sequels. And obviously, the second Disney bought Star Wars and bought George Lucas's story treatments, they threw it out and did their own thing that left George Lucas feeling betrayed by Disney. So us fans often just sit and ponder what could have been the Star Wars sequels made by the original creator that we will never see. And I see many people online claiming that they would have been amazing or better than what Disney made, and I 100% agree with that statement that George would have made a much better and more interesting sequel trilogy than Disney. But let's not forget that it's only in very recent years that fans have come back around to be positive about George Lucas. As a prequel fan that grew up loving those movies, going online to share my love for the prequels when I was a kid, terrible experience. People just constantly talking about how George Lucas ruined their childhood and that everything they do is awful. Anyone that likes it is a moron. Like, it's all just a bunch of crap. But I understand. Hindsight being 2020, we see that we had it much better with George. He had an original and interesting idea for what he wanted to do with Star Wars, not just repeat everything that he already had done before. And we can clearly see that Disney is only interested in retreading ground that George already had done over 40 years ago. But let's be 100% honest with ourselves. If George was able to make and create his own Star Wars sequel trilogy, I am more than 100% sure that there still would be a large portion of the fan base that would have hated what he did, just like when the prequels came out. Now, I love the fact that George is getting a lot of love lately. I think it's fantastic, and it makes me so happy to see positive conversations about the prequels. And if George could make the sequels he wanted to make, people would still make hours and hours of YouTube video essays on how awful it all is. And this isn't to defend the Disney sequels. I do not enjoy those. I have not enjoyed a majority of what they have done. But it just bothers me how so many people now claim George would have made the sequels beloved and amazing when those same fans were probably the ones that would talk endless crap online about George and to kids like me that loved the prequels back in the day. People would still be fighting over if his sequels were any good. People would be praising them as absolute masterpieces, and other people would claim that it once again destroyed their childhood, which is a ridiculous statement. The sad truth is, no matter how much we love George now, if he had made his movies the way he wanted to make them, there are a lot of fans out there that would have hated his films just as much as they hate the Disney films now. I think George would have made some fantastic, innovative, and interesting films, and sadly we might never know what those films would be, and I know we have some idea that they would have delved kind of more into the Force, but it's hard to guess what the final product would have actually been. One thing I do know is that if George Lucas had Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford all in the same movie, all playing their original characters, he would have had all three of them in at least one scene together. I mean, that'd be ridiculous, right? Like, who would make a Star Wars sequel film with all three original characters in the same movie, but at no point do they all interact with each other? That'd be ridiculous. I'm really glad that, that would never happen, because that would have just been ridiculous. But, what do you guys think? Do you think if George Lucas was able to make the sequels that he originally outlined and the story treatments, that they would have been any good? How do you think they would have been received? let me know down below.